Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise pros, Stan the Man, Paul Segreto, Badlands, baby. Franchising today, sustainable growth, the sensible franchising. Franchise today, sustainable growth, the sensible franchising. Franchise today, franchising today, franchising today, yeah.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today. Today is August 2nd, 2017. I'm reporting live from the very, very hot and humid city of Houston, Texas, and my co-host, the ever-lovable, the infamous Stan Friedman, reporting live from the hot city of Hotlanta.
You know, I think you've displaced me, Paul. I really do. In fact, I'm going to have to check in with Lane Fisher because Lane used to give me all kinds of razzmatazz because all the time on Facebook I would post the weather here in Atlanta, and the weather is something that you open our podcast with every week, and I think I'm passing the crown and the baton off, or the thermometer, if you will, off to you.
Well, that is
Welcome
good.
back,
and,
Paul.
Speaking of Lane, thank you. Speaking of Lane, too, just trying to wrap up or confirm with him and Brad Fishman. They will be on in August, later in the month, to talk about their upcoming Springboard Conference in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Looking forward to it, actually. I'm a sponsor and a participant, and I'm looking forward to that event as I do every year because typically, Paul, out of everything that we both participate in through IFA and otherwise, the things that I really love most with the greatest of passion are centered around emerging franchisors. So that conference to me is always my favorite.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Stan, I know you have limited time today because you've got an event this afternoon. So why don't you tell us about it and then get to doing your final preparations as I bring on today's guest.
Sure enough, Paul, and thanks for the opportunity to do that today. I've got the IFA's Wednesday Wise webinar today, and I'll be talking about the topic that we've titled it is making more out of less, and the tools that you use to do so. And we're kind of looking at it from the perspective, Paul, of what's happened since November, which in many things have happened since November, and not to get political about it, one thing that has been remarkable is that for the first time in 10 years, the U.S. can claim to have a burgeoning job market. And because the job market is up, franchise lead pools dwindle, and they suffer because of that. And so we're going to talk about things that you can be doing to help make the most of what you've got and to make certain that everything from your website's presence to the tools that you're using are fine-tuned to optimize the opportunities that you've got and get more people engaged in your processes. And kind of that's what we're going to talk about today at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. And if anyone has still not registered and would like to, listening live, you've got 2 hours to do so. And there'll be some deliverables coming out of the webinar as well. But thanks to the IFA for the opportunity and the supplier board for the privilege of letting me participate and host this webinar today.
Well, thank you, Stan. Best of luck with that webinar, and I look forward to having you back on the show next week. Next week we have Sabrina Wall, the founder and CEO of the Franchise Brokers Association, will be our guest. So should be an interesting conversation.
And I'll apologize in advance to Jeff Lefler for bailing out on today's call, and instead of having a tag team with you and me, Paul, he's one-on-one. So my apologies to Jeff, but you guys are going to be great, and I'm going to back out and let you take it away.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Stan. So interesting quote that I read from Jeff. The challenge is that using franchise services or eating at a franchise location is far different than investing in a franchise. There are often significant differences between a good consumer franchise and a good investment franchise. Jeff, welcome to Franchise Today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, it's interesting that Stan and the IFA today are talking about, different things, different resources and tools they should be using in their franchise sales process. And, of course, your company, franchisegrade.com, is also an additional resource for franchise organizations, as well as candidates alike. So what I'd like to start off with, though, is tell us some about, Jeff Lefler, the person. Go back as far as you'd like to go back and take us up to, why franchisegrade.com, why franchising, and of course, your entry into the space.
Yeah, thanks. My franchise experience started when I was in university. I invested as a minority shareholder into a franchisee that delivered bread. The company was called Canada Bread. So there was no expectation. It just happened that business opportunity came about, and I looked at the investment and what was interesting was that it was a service-based model that delivered to different grocery stores. So there was no significant retail or outlay of costs other than a delivery truck. Throughout the years, over about a 10-year period, I ended up purchasing out the existing franchisee and increased to 3 franchises. In that system, I learned a lot about the franchise relationship with the franchisor. There was good times and bad. And in 06, 07, there was some commodity pressures that were put on the franchisor. And ultimately, a relationship ensued where there was some margin issues between trying to obviously cover increased operating costs on their side and obviously our side. So at that time, I created a franchisee association where we did an entire recruitment and retention effort across the country to bring in almost 1,000 franchisees into our association, where we were advocating for franchisee interests. So that was kind of my first step into something beyond just being a franchisee. And as that grew, I started attending different conferences for franchisee association conferences, and began consulting for other franchise systems on how to create an association, how to create an advocacy type association, not an aggressive kind of punitive attempt. This was about finding a way to create a relationship between the franchisees and the franchisor that was to come to some sort of amicable solution. As I did that, I started speaking with different franchisees on why they purchased a particular franchise. And the quote you read at the very beginning is exactly what I found, that there were franchisees who invested because they liked the taste of the food, or because they had some affinity to the brand from a consumer side. So their consumer mindset drove their investment decision, which ultimately led to some significant challenges between either them specifically or the franchise network specifically, or together, and the franchisor. So at the same time, I'm also my own day trader. I invest into stocks. I'm a technical investor. And what's interesting is that there was really no analytics within franchising to gauge competitive investment opportunities. From a stock perspective, I could look at 5 or 6 different stocks and look at their technicals and come up with some rationale as to why I would invest my money into stock A as opposed to stock B. But from a franchise perspective, looking at the same type of dollar amount, there really wasn't any direct comparisons at the time to see the investment risks or evaluate the investment risks independent of any subjective feelings or subjective components to the investment, whether that was there was affinity or a passion about that brand. And that's the genesis of Franchise Grade.
Interesting. So did you found, are you the founder of franchisegrade.com?
Yes. Yeah. I founded it in 2013.
Okay, excellent. And I just wanted to clarify that because every place that I looked online, I see you as the CEO, and I thought you were the founder. So thanks for clarifying that. So franchisegrade.com over the last 4 years has proved very much a resource, a valuable resource for both individuals, whether it be new to franchising or even to the sophisticated franchise investor, along the lines of what you talked about in a great analogy in comparing it to investing in stocks. Yes, there's really not a lot of information that's out there, and certainly franchisegrade.com has really filled the gap, so to speak, a very large gap, at least in my own personal estimation and opinion. But it's also a very valuable resource for franchisors. So let's talk a little bit about the two client models here. Let's start with the franchisor model. Why franchisegrade.com for franchisors?
The challenges in growing a franchise brand are substantial, and from our statistics on emerging brands, there is a significant pool of franchise brands that are struggling to get beyond various thresholds from 25 to 50 to 100 outlets. The differentiation, so what it comes down to is the ability to understand your competitive mix, making sure that you have, as a franchisor, an ability to put a value proposition on the investment criteria when you're speaking with a candidate. And that's been something that a lot of our clients have found was the statistics to say to a candidate that our brand has X attribute where only 20% in the industry offer that opportunity or offer that territory protection, whatever the case might be, goes a long way to instilling trust into the candidate, into that sales conversation. And so the goal from our side was to be able to provide franchisors with those readily access to those statistics so that they can put a value proposition out there that's not just the consumer side or the brand itself, being able to take that and compare it to other opportunities.
So what is the type of information that you provide to franchisors to tie that all into a nice little package?
We have a platform. It's called Franchise Intelligence. What it entails is we have thousands and thousands of data points we extract from an FDD. So this is everything from the various types of litigation, whether that's against a franchisee or against a franchisor, various Item 5 components, Item 6, all the way through to state level Item 20 data. We take all that information from franchise systems as a whole, and any one brand can look at their specific franchise and compare it to aggregates of like competitors. So you can compare a burger franchise to all burger concepts, or $1 million investment to all $1 million investments, or service-based or home-based to that group. And that would aggregate anything from, the average franchise fee, royalty, the different ad components, the territory commitments, the termination rights, a variety of different other components, the growth or turnover by state. And the goal ultimately is to give that franchisor the ability to understand where they sit in any competitive set, whether that's the size of the franchise, whether that's the investment range of the franchise, or whether that's the specific business model that they're in. There's also an ability to compare direct systems. So if there are key competitors that your candidates come to you saying, we are looking at your brand and brand XYZ, the ability to go in and look at those specific competitors, download their FDDs, analyze any information. And ultimately, we're providing a bit of guidance on what we call an FDD audit. So this is the way to present your FDD to the type of candidate you are targeting.
So is the relationship with franchisors a one-time project, or is there ongoing activities through the year, or is it just something that's done once a year?
So there are one-time projects, but our primary engagement with franchisors are a subscription-based service. So it's self-directed, where we have companies where their sales team uses the service on a regular basis while they're working on webinars or discovery days with candidates. The executive team is doing the strategic reviews during renewal season, and other individuals within the organization from a compliance perspective or a competitive set to grab FDDs to provide to their legal team. Ultimately, the package that we have is kind of suited to various roles within the organization, including even marketing, going in and being able to pull statistics to incorporate into marketing documents.
Very interesting. What is some of the feedback been from your growing list of clients?
I'm going to say awe to a certain extent because of the variety of services. And I say that obviously self-serving to a certain extent, but what it comes down to is just understanding how to use the platform. It takes a bit of a learning curve to get in, and once that's done, the comfort level of the franchisor using that service and actually integrating it into a support structure, the feedback we've given has been very positive around just the value of helping them understand the landscape and understand how their brand is positioned in that in the franchise space.
So from the perspective, as you know, again, going back to Stan's participation, or actually spearheading this afternoon's Wednesday Wise webinar with the IFA, focused on franchise sales and development, because as he said, back in November, change in leadership in the country has now looks like everything's moving towards increased jobs, and as Stan said many times before, as this has occurred, the franchise pool kind of dwindles a bit, and so franchisors really need to start. And I'm not going to say so much they need to get creative, but creative in a way of thinking outside what has been the normal box for them for the last 3 or 4 years since we came out of the financial debacle of 2008 to 2012. So why, in your estimation, if you were pitching to a franchisor that has stayed the course the last few years and now has to start looking at adding some changes? So this is, and I will preface this by, this will be self-serving, okay? But I want our listeners to listen to, what your pitch would be to a franchisor of why, especially now, it's absolutely essential they bring in your organization and the services that you provide.
Yeah, the candidate pool is going to shrink a little bit, and having that individual in front of you and gaining their attention, gaining their trust is critical. So what we're providing is ultimately an ability to make sure that when you present your brand from an investment perspective, that you're competitive in your space. And it doesn't mean that you're offering a larger territory. It means that you're offering a competitive territory, and that might mean that there are no territories. But understanding that and being able to put yourself in a position of authority with that candidate keeps them engaged with you. So at the same time, understanding the evolution of some of your competitors. There are various companies that are evolving year over year with their offering. That's either decreased royalties or more transparency on an item 19. Trying to make sure that you understand the landscape of what they're offering to that individual is important. I mean, so from our side, we're providing an insight into kind of the macro trends of the industry, as well as a direct analysis of your competitive environment. We work with a number of prospective franchisees. They come to our website and engage us looking for information. So we study their engagement flow with various franchisors. And, I've read this in others have talked about this, where franchise prospects are looking to gather as much information as possible before they engage the franchisee. Searching on Google is a lot easier than it was 10 years ago. So franchise prospects are gathering as much information as they can and then engaging the franchisor. So being in a position where you're able to differentiate yourself or put yourself in a view or in front of those individuals and be able to offer or identify the value of the brand is going to bring more candidates to you. And we can provide kind of an insight into how to do that.
Yeah, certainly today's candidate not only is more educated and sophisticated than ever before, but they're certainly more technologically advanced than ever before. But of course, due to what's in our rearview mirror, 2008 to 2012, they're also more diligent and cautious than ever before. And of course, along with that comes a certain level of anxiety. And I know I've been promoting for quite a while that the old A to Z franchise sales process, where somebody called up and said, "Hey, I want to learn about your brand," and the representative sent them out a 4-color brochure, tapped their fingers on the desk for about 2 to 3 days, make sure they received it, called them to make sure they received it, gave them another day or two to pour through that, set up a conversation. After that conversation, took that printed copy of the disclosure document, whether it be the UFOC or even the early stages of the FDD, and sent it out expensively overnight mail, waited a couple of days and went through that same process. And there was no way for, candidates really to do some of their own research. The franchisor, the franchise salesperson, was typically totally in control of the process. And of course, what we're finding now and experiencing now are candidates coming in that might really be the equivalent of letter M or S in the franchise sales process, because they know so much. And of course, we have to make sure as franchise sales representatives that we respect that, because they've invested a lot of time in it. So what would you say to a franchisor that says, "Well, you know what, Jeff, that sounds, good. It sounds great that you provide this information. But, I could put on somebody on staff and I could probably do a lot of research myself." How would you argue against that?
Look, the FDDs are publicly accessible. This is a matter of convenience. We're providing a real-time access to all of that data. So from a cost perspective, it's one thing to put a body on it, but to be able to have access to the data in 5 minutes or in 5 seconds is not going to happen. So, our subscription is a very cost-effective solution relative to putting bodies on, sourcing FDDs, finding them, extracting the information, doing the comparisons. And that's ultimately what we're providing is a convenience on kind of a macro scale, not just the window of franchise opportunities that you as a team see. And we were actually on the phone with a franchisor that we identified a competitor that they did not know about. It was an emerging brand. We talked about that competitor, and they went, "Oh, wow, I can't believe we didn't know about that brand." So the ability to potentially expand the scope of your current knowledge base is critical, because this is our core competency, is making sure that we have visibility in as broad of the franchise industry as possible.
So, and I imagine, a big advantage too would be as changes occur. I mean, obviously, you're staying up. You and your team are staying up to date on changes and seeing things and updating information accordingly. Explain a little bit about what your team looks like. What is franchisegrade.com made up of with respect to personnel and human resources?
Yeah. Yeah, most of my staff are in either software development, IT, or research. I have a very small sales team. Our priority is data research, data integrity, data analysis, coupled with technology solutions that are supporting those visualizations and those analytics. So my team has grown significantly over the last year, and those two primary components have been IT and research. All of my research staff qualify every single FDD, so we do have some varying automation and analyses based on technology and AI, but we have real-time or real people validating and making sure that the FDD data is accurate and understood and interpreted in a way that's appropriate for the research.
What are some of the hot spots that you particularly zone in on? And I know you do quite a comprehensive review, but what are a couple of the hot spots on the within the FDD that you initially really want to look at that potentially could be, red flags?
Yeah, I mean, item 20 is obviously a given. Closures, ceased operations, terminations. So that's a key priority that we look at. Sold but not open pipeline is something that we watch as a trending component, not necessarily any 1 or 2 years, but over a period of time if sales are occurring but locations are not opening. Those are indications based on kind of studying a larger scale across the industry that those franchise systems do not grow or hit a certain threshold and potentially contract. Item 19, we look at whether there is obviously an item 19. Secondary to that, we look at the type of disclosure, whether there is expense data of some form in that item 19. And we look at disclosure value, meaning there are certain franchise systems that may disclose an item 19 with expense data, but only disclose 25% of their entire franchise network. Looking at that and understanding that could be a risk or there's a gray area that's not disclosed, we identify those types of attributes. But outside of that, each sector is a little different. Restaurant brands, having a territory is not as important or is not as widespread within all QSR and full-service restaurants. But in a service-based franchise, there's a higher proportion that are there's protections or exclusivity within the territory. So looking at those kind of attributes on a key competitive basis as opposed to the industry as a whole makes it a little more relative to the investment type.
Excellent. You're listening today to Franchise Today. I'm Paul Segreto. Typically, my co-host, Stan Friedman, would be on with me today, but he had to bail after the first part of the show as he is preparing for today's Wednesday Wise webinar that he's hosting on behalf of the International Franchise Association. And we're talking today with Jeff Lefler, CEO at Franchise Grade. Franchise Today is brought to you by the Franchise Foundry, where we've been bringing emerging brands to market for more than 30 years. The Foundry fosters healthy, sustainable growth for their clients, the kind that comes from experience. Franchise Foundry provides both coaching and consulting, a hybrid approach that delivers more effective solutions for both the franchisor's corporate team as well as for their franchisees. Franchise Foundry team is rich in practical hands-on experience and expertise with general business management, operational and change management, digital marketing, and, of course, franchise recruitment and development. Plus, the Foundry team can also assist you with creating roadmaps for potential mergers and acquisitions and provide you with the guidance needed to navigate them. Learn more about the Franchise Foundry, along with the ever-expanding list of clients at www.franchisefoundry.com. Franchise Today is also brought to you by FRM Solutions, offering best-in-class CRM and document management software designed specifically for franchising. FRM empowers real-time business intelligence, communication, and collaboration between all members of the franchisor's team and prospective as well as existing franchisees. This enables you to simply and seamlessly track, access, and manage all messages to and from prospective and existing franchisees, including text. Legal compliance is simplified too, with FRM's document management, and even site visits can be digitally facilitated and scored within FRM. Make today the day you give FRM a look and assure that all of your candidate and franchisee correspondence, including text messages, are being permanently tracked and stored in candidate and franchisee records. FRM even provides state-of-the-art digital experiences for your prospective franchisees, replacing old-style virtual brochures. No long-term contracts, multiple upgrades each year at no additional cost each year. No excuses, just solutions. On the web at frmsolutions.com. Jeff, going back to the question about the hot spots, the red flags that you look for, what are the things that you might look for an emerging brand that might be different than from a more established or mature or legacy brand?
The components of an emerging brand, some of the statistics. So we studied a number of brands from 2010 to 2016 that started franchising in 2010 and kind of watched their trending and what they've done, and studied the offering that they've had during that time. So from an emerging brand point of view, it's two things primarily. One is the development areas or the territories that they're developing that kind of we're expecting to see in a positive brand, a hub and spoke type mentality or growth opportunity. Mm-hmm. We see more often brands that'll jump multiple states or across country hit a threshold and contract or stop growing. Those that have done a bit more of a hub and spoke and went so far within a geographic territory and then kind of expanded on that development and then took a next step have had sustainable growth. It's been a little slower at times, but there's been a continued sustainable growth over that period. At the same time, we've seen that correlated with a larger local ad spend requirement in the item 6 as opposed to a national ad spend requirement. And I think part of that is just local brand awareness, putting more money to the franchisee's local market. As an emerging brand, there probably is not as much brand equity once you get beyond that initial territory of the business. So we've also seen a correlation with franchise systems, emerging brands that have had a larger local ad spend relative to national, where they've done well or better on average than the reverse of that.
And is there any benefit to a startup franchisor to have their FDD evaluated and go through your process when they have yet to even bring on franchisee 1?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a startup franchise, those that have had better growth are ones that are disclosing expense data within their corporate or company outlets. And typically we've seen actually those that have disclosed individual company outlets, if there's more than one, where they're, instead of doing an average, they're actually identifying each individual outlet with some expense data attributes. Since 2010 to 2016, have had better growth rate than those, in particular those without any item 19 period. But those startup brands obviously have to be a bit more competitive in their offering, but a lot of times they pick the wrong investment attribute to reduce, say the franchise fee or the royalty rate. These are things that the franchisor needs as revenue to be able to sustain their support of their emerging or developing brand. So, when we work with a startup franchisor, we're identifying those kind of two components. One, how to differentiate yourself from other startups by providing that item 19 data, the company information, making sure that the franchisee understands that, yes, it is a higher risk, but the company outlets are successful, are profitable based on the expense disclosure. And in addition to that, put additional value around other attributes of the offering, but not impede or infringe on your revenue stream or your future revenue stream from these locations.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Obviously, as we're talking, you're quite, knowledgeable about the FDD, the various components, and are able to, spew out information at a simple request. And this will be off the cuff, and I have my own opinions on this, so there's no right or wrong answer to this. But in your mind, how many franchisors truly understand the information in their FDD?
Limited. And
yeah, it is limited.
And I say that because from a sales or an executive perspective, there isn't necessarily that need to understand it in that depth. But it is amazing how many audits that we've done where we've identified components of an FDD where the team, the franchisors came back to us and said, we didn't even see that. We didn't even know that was there. It was just, we've seen this so many times, we just glaze over it. And I'm just surprised, even spelling mistakes, errors, item 20 errors in FDDs just amaze me that the math does not work. But franchisors, to your point, or, in my opinion, a lot of them do not understand the depth of their FDD, and when it comes to a sales side, they might not need to, but it will hurt them at times with a candidate.
Sure, no doubt. Interesting story. Having worked with, just a large number of startup and emerging brands, one in particular that I won't name was in the children's space, and was very proud of the fact that he spent X amount of dollars on his FDD and had that all in order, and don't even want you looking at it if you're going to charge me for it type of mentality. I said, well, I'm still going to review it anyway. And I wound up calling him up about 10:30 on a Friday night and said, why are you calling me so late? I said, I had a question that I just felt I had to ask right now as I was reading through your FDD. And of course he said, oh, that's good, isn't it? Isn't it a good FDD? I said, yeah, but I've got a question that I'm trying to have a hard time figuring out. Explain to me where the pizza oven is in your business. And he said,
yes.
Paul, what are you talking about, pizza oven? I've got, this type. I said, well, it's on page such and such in your FDD, and I know because you spent a lot of money, you must have certainly read through the FDD so you had an understanding of it. I'm just trying to understand where it goes inside the business and how you explain it to a franchisee or a prospective franchisee considering that you're a children's business. And there was just silence, and he said, point well taken. And that really stuck in my mind. And I kind of just did a little bit of an off-the-cuff type of, test that as I spoke with founders and their CEOs, and certainly didn't want to put them on the spot, but I'll tell you why, this is what I would say to a CEO or a founder, why we can help your business in what we do. I said, and I'm not even going to pitch you anything. Give your franchise development team, this test without them having an opportunity to go back to the FDD. And we did about 20 of them. And it was simple 15 or 20 questions, but it was really simple stuff like, how much is your franchise fee? How much is the discount for multiple locations? Do you offer a discount for veterans? What is that discount if you do? What is the marketing fee? What is this? What is that? It was all very, very simple stuff, not like some of the stuff that they may not need to know from the sales process, right? This is stuff you would think they need to know. Out of about 20 franchisors that we did that, using 70% as a passing grade, 3/4 of them failed.
Wow.
The franchise founders were just appalled.
Well, and what I struggle with is the amount of money and effort that's spent on bringing a candidate into that sales funnel, whether it's buying leads, using a broker, marketing, advertising expenses. it is difficult to get that candidate to focus on you. If you're able as a franchisor to bring them through the sales process and are not able to convey or explain your brand in a way that they're comfortable with, or worst case, provide them an FDD where their law firm or their lawyer or the legal counsel will review it and come up with the concept of, oh, hey, you're investing to this children's franchise. They're offering a pizza oven as part of it. What does that say about the brand? I mean, that really hinders and potentially creates a substantial risk for a candidate that probably otherwise would have said yes and invested. So this concept of using the FDD as a marketing tool, I've said that for the last 4 years. This is about making sure that you're putting yourself in the best position, the best foot forward. You're shining your shoes, you're polishing, suit and tie in front of a candidate while they're exploring your option. If you're better and more well-dressed relative to your competitors, the ability to have that conversation and also show that will just help increase your sales.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, why would you have something that you spend $25,000 to $40,000 on and not utilize it to your advantage? Why not want to showcase it, especially since the majority will read it even before becoming a quote-unquote candidate in your sales funnel? They can get that information, from a variety of places without even contacting the franchisor. But why not make it, part of the process and use it to your advantage? And I know I've had umpteen debates, and most recently a debate on the subject on one of the LinkedIn groups about when the disclosure document should be provided to the franchise candidate. And, of course, the law says, law, rule, whatever you want to call it, I think it's the law says that the first time they request it and is at the very minimum. And still there are franchisors and others in the space that say, oh, no, they got to be qualified, they got to be genuine. And, of course, I argue back, putting aside all the benefits of providing it to them and saying they can get it any place. Some free, some they just got to spend a few bucks. So why throw up a red flag and say, oh, no, I can't send it to you? It just, to me, is absurd.
Well, I think that's, to a certain extent, I'll call it old school thought. I mean, we're in a technology age. Data's easy to get. Information's easy to get. Sometimes there's too much, but ultimately it's not about hoarding or preventing somebody from getting the information, because if you do that, like you said, it's a red flag. So being transparent about it, every franchisor is going to have their warts, if you will. There's not a perfect franchise out there. There are great franchises, and each franchise is going to be different depending on the type of candidate, the location, a variety of factors. So why put up those red flags, like you said? Why try to hide what is technically already public and available? And so I've had those conversations with franchisors too, and I think to a certain extent it's the goal is to control the message around primarily maybe why they do not have an item 19 or why they've only have a 5-year term when their competitors have 10 or 15 type situations. So they're trying to control the objection handling.
Sure.
And I think that's the intent around that mindset. Which is a fair position to take, but it will not prevent that individual from getting that information regardless.
Well, and then when they get that information, now you're dealing with somebody that's surprised, and it may, cast some doubts and interfere with the franchise sales process from progressing, forward. I mean, it's an element of surprise. It's there. Yeah. Why not talk about it up front? I know one of the things that myself and my team do is we instruct and highly suggest, I won't say instruct, we highly suggest, candidates print out the FDD, even in today's digital world, and we tell them to take a highlighter and a red pen and highlight all the things they have, concerns, questions about, need clarification, if there's anything specific. take that red pen and write down the margin, the questions that they have, and make it a living document that grows with them. And a matter of fact, we've even incorporated some of the disclosure document into the operations manual, reminding them of different things along in the process, because we're firm believers that if an organization is going to spend that $25,000 to $40,000 on a document, let's utilize it for what it's worth and utilize it to our advantage in a lot of different ways. And I know candidates really appreciate that. And, I mean, to me, I cannot find anything wrong in doing that, whether it be from a legal standpoint, from a best practices standpoint, or from even a logical standpoint. I can't find anything wrong with that type of process.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And it's a franchise candidate's going to engage if they like the brand and if there's an affinity that's both, like a passion or a kind of qualitative approach, cultural mindset, as well as an investment mindset. But
sure,
allowing them to process that information through the FDD to be able to, and from our side, we tell candidates, look, or our prospective franchisees that engage us, take a first pass at the FDD and just pull out the key attributes that you think are important within the franchise, whether that's the franchise fee, the royalties, kind of the ongoing, the franchise relationship at the end of the day, because it's not an independent business. There are give and take. Find the things that are kind of relevant on the surface, understand what they are, and then on a second pass, dig in deeper and exactly, like you said, write down questions,
sure,
highlight different components of it. But get a first pass to understand kind of the core elements of the relationship that you're going to be part of for 10 or more years. And that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah.
So why not provide that information?
Having been on the franchisor side in my career and having, well over 1,000 franchises sold, I always used the franchise disclosure document, and back in the day, the Uniform Franchise Offering Circular, throughout the relationship with the franchisee, and not from the standpoint of holding the legal compliance terms over their head, but from a practical standpoint of getting them to understand what the system was about, what the responsibilities were, and why it's to the benefit of them and the entire organization. And I'll tell you, and I feel very honored that for the most part, we had little issues with franchisees that were brought in under that premise and process and lasted through the term of the franchise agreement. I mean, I think it's just an absolute valuable tool. We're franchised today live. It is Wednesday, August 2nd, and I am speaking with the founder and CEO of FranchiseGrade.com, Jeff Lefler. Jeff, let's take a different path right now than we did the first 45 minutes of the show and wrap up with this. How valuable a resource is FranchiseGrade.com? We've already discussed it on the franchisor side, but now let's talk about the interested party all the way up to the franchise candidate, whether they be a first-time investor in a franchise or a more sophisticated investor. How does FranchiseGrade.com become that valuable resource for the interested party and candidates?
Yeah. So from a prospect side, I mean, we're one tool in a tool belt. We're one component to their due diligence effort. So whether you're a first-time candidate, a lot of our messaging and support can be pared down to be digestible and understood. Versus a sophisticated investor, we license data to larger multi-unit franchisees, private equity groups, academic institutions, where they're accessing data on a macro level and running their own analytics and research. So at the end of the day, the data is valuable how we present it to the different types of stakeholders in the industry is done in a way so that it's useful to them. To look at everything en masse, it would be very difficult for a first-time franchise investor to be able to understand all the little nuances of a franchise comparison. But being able to scale that down and provide them with an easy-to-understand report card or an easy-to-understand research paper around specific interests in the QSR space or pet services or home care, just helps them focus and get beyond the consumer mindset. And that's ultimately the goal with that, is being able to provide that prospect, primarily the first-time prospect, a window into something other than, I love the taste of that food. And if we do that and we can get them to think outside of that space, that's kind of our goal.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great quote, and I'll say it again. The challenges that using franchise services or eating at a franchise location is far different than investing in a franchise. There are often significant differences between a good consumer franchise and a good investment franchise. I think that is absolutely a priceless quote that you had here, or had before the show that we've repeated here. I could even see it obviously being valuable for the very sophisticated franchise investor that, might already be a multi-unit operator and looking at a new brand, because as smart as they are and as diligent and excellent as they are at operating multi-unit operations, with a new brand, obviously, your resources are going to provide them with a different glimpse than they might already, have. And I think that's obviously priceless to the sophisticated individual as well. And as go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, as kind of a step back to that, it's also an ability to provide them with a larger scope of opportunities. A lot of times we'll have that sophisticated investor come to us with, I'm looking for something outside of the burger space with development opportunities in this 3 or 4 state area that's their existing demographic or existing territory. And we can pull together a number of brands and provide them with a list that they have opportunities on there that they did not know about. So it just broadens their ability to see the opportunities that are available.
How do franchisors react that are interested in your products and services? I guess it's more service. When they see that you also work with franchisees, and I know some within the industry actually think of franchisegrade.com as a portal of sorts. Some maybe even seeing that as a conflict. What's your stand on that?
Our fundamental offering is data research. So we're providing different services to different cohorts or stakeholders in the industry. So yes, we do have prospects use our service, and yes, we can match them up to different franchise systems, but every single brand that we have information on, we provide the exact same amount of information to any candidate. So there's no, from a lead generation or a portal perspective, that's one very tiny component of our platform that does not match to what we're offering that franchisor as a service. It's very limited in the scope of what we provide. So at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that healthy, sustainable franchises grow. And if we can highlight them and ultimately identify them and help them position themselves, those that may not be as sustainable or healthy, I would not recommend them to a prospect, or I would not recommend them to my friend or my family. So, and I can prove statistically why that makes sense or why that would happen. So I get the frustration from some brands, but at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that everybody in the industry is making money.
I do agree, and I love the sentence on your website, and I actually believe it should be more towards the top as opposed to at the very bottom. And it says our motivation is simple. We want to raise the bar and build a strong franchise community for all stakeholders. I think that's kind of just sums it up. And to help you in this, I do agree. I think, as a data company, one of the leading data market research companies in franchising, I do believe that your products and services are beneficial to a host of different clients. And I'll read from your website. It says our products and services serve a variety of clients. And there's a list of 7 or 8 here. Prospective franchisees exploring and planning to invest in a franchise, individuals interested in acquiring an existing franchise, private equity or investment groups that make investments, franchisors looking for ways to improve the performance of their franchise operation and competitive position, a franchisee association recruiting new members, an academic institution exploring the franchise industry, or a government agency studying the business model. So I honestly believe that your products and services are beneficial in a lot of different ways for a lot of different clients that are out there.
Thank you. Yeah.
So how can individuals, whether they be franchise candidates, people that are just interested in franchising, or franchisors, learn more about Franchise Grade?
Yeah, our website is tailored to prospective franchisees. So for any prospect or any individual looking for a franchise opportunity, our website is tailored to help search and research and get data on any franchise system. From a franchisor perspective, the best thing that we do is we're able to take somebody through a demo of the platform to show the depth and the scope of it. And the easy answer is to either call us directly, or I can even give my phone number over the phone right now, or over the...
Yes, absolutely. Give us the contact information.
Yeah, so my number is 917-633-4593.
Well, that's great. And the site is franchisegrade.com. So if you want information about it, I would at least highly recommend taking Jeff and his team up on the offer to take you through their platform. Having been through it myself, I was quite impressed. Jeff, I really appreciate you being our guest today on Franchise Today. I know Stan really wanted to be on here today, but of course had a prior commitment in getting ready for the IFA Wednesday Wise webinar. But certainly we do appreciate you being our guest today and sharing so much information.
Yeah, and thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, that's another episode of Franchise Today. Remember, next week we have Sabrina Wall, the CEO and founder of the Franchise Broker Association. She'll be our guest. It should be another interesting topic as we're in the midst of the middle of our 8th year on Franchise Today. Until next week, my name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best, the very best, in this great, great thing we call franchising, and Franchise Today is out.
Franchise pros, Stan the man, Paul Segreto, Badlands, baby. Franchising today, sustainable growth, the sensible franchising. Franchise today, sustainable growth, the sensible franchising. Franchise today, franchise today, franchising today. Yeah.
When it's PCS time, you know the drill. Pack, research the new base, get the kids in school, because family supports family. At American Public University, we support military families with flexible, affordable online education that moves with you. As a military spouse, your tuition rate is the same as your partner's, just $250 per credit hour. American Public University, education that moves with you. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.